everybody, it's Sarah, and today I want to share with you what I have read so far in the month of August. Before we get into that though, as some of you might already know, I created a book club all about reading adult high fantasy written by women, and the book club is called Of Queens, Witches and Valkyries. I will leave the announcement video linked down below and up there. It's going to kick off in September, and so I created a poll for the first read of this book club on Twitter. So if you're interested in joining, definitely go and check that out. Twitter also is linked down below. The 4 choices for the first book that we're going to read in this book club are The Sword of Kaigang by M.L. Wang. Then I also have The Harp of Kings by Juliet Marillier, Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and then The Vanished Queen by, I forgot the name of the author. But yeah, if you're interested, definitely go and check it out. All the links that are important for the book club, Discord, Goodreads, Twitter are down below, as I said. And now let's get into what I have read so far this month. Let's start out with the plethora of books that I am still currently reading. First, I am still reading Eva Fair by Nisi Shawl. This is an alternate history, historical fantasy, steampunk kind of novel that is set in the Congo during the reign of Leopold II, who was the king that colonialized the Congo and who did all the atrocities there, among other things. And it's kind of an alternate history asking what would have happened if the people of the Congo had had advanced technology. I'm just not feeling this book, I have to say. I'm going to give it at least 100 more pages. I am like 140 pages in, so I'm going to give it half the book. It's a bit less than 400 pages, the book. But so far I'm not feeling it. There's way too many POV characters, which means I don't really feel connected to any of the characters, and I don't really care about any of the characters. And I'm also not really feeling the way it's written so far. But we'll see at the end of the month wrap up whether or not I manage to finish this. The second book I'm currently reading is A Certain Ambiguity by Gaudav Suri and Hartosh Singh Bal. And this story follows a young Indian man who moves to America to study there. He actually studies a business, but one semester he takes a course in, I don't know what it's called in English, but like the mathematics of eternity or something. Like, it's not eternity. Eternity seems to be the wrong word, but I don't know what the English word is. I hope he takes a mathematics course. That's basically it. And he also finds out that at the beginning of the 20th century, his grandfather also spent time in the US, and he was put in jail because of blasphemous things he said about the Christian faith. Now, I am about a third of the way into the book, about 160 pages, and I am a fan of the mathematics stuff so far. It's so well explained and it's so easy to grasp if you like put a little bit of effort in, but I'm one of those weird people who actually really enjoys mathematics. I'm not so much a fan of the religious stuff so far in this book. I'm not sure which way it's going to go. But I can imagine that potentially the way this book is written is in a way where it annoys both atheists and religious people. And I'm one of those things. But yeah, it's up to you to decide which of those. No, I'm atheistic and I really don't care what you believe, but don't equate sciences with religion, and that's currently kind of happening in this book, and that annoys me a little bit. Now that I have probably lost a few followers by saying that I'm an atheist, or maybe I just have no trust in religious people, that could also be. But let's move on to the next book, which is The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. I am almost done with this book. I have about 100 pages left. This is the first book in the Dreamblood duology, and so far I have to say I'm enjoying it more than 5th season. Which might be because of the setting, because this is more of a fantastical setting and less of a like dystopian setting, which usually I'm not too much of a fan of. They're kind of too bleak for my taste. Then 2 books I have barely just started is first The Gilda Stories by Jewel Gomez. This is a lesbian black vampire book, and I thought it's the right time to start it if I hadn't already planned to start it, because Midnight Sun just came out and yeah, I felt like some vampire feels. Although this is a lot more literary fiction than most vampire books are. And you kind of, I'm not very far into it, I'm only 50 pages into it, so I cannot say too much what it's about. But as far as I gathered, it's just about the life story of this runaway slave from 1850 who gets turned into a vampire and then just tries to deal with that. And then lastly, I also started and am about 50 pages into The Gospel of Loki by Joanne M. Harris. This is a reread for me, and this is the book that's kind of the pre-buddy read of my book club, so that we can also kind of already buddy read something in August before it really kicks off in September. And this is a retelling, although retelling isn't really right, because retellings are kind of reimaginings a little bit more. It's more a recounting of Norse mythology, of the, I think, poetic or prose Edda, so like the big written down version of Norse mythology that we get most of our info on Norse mythology from, and it's from the point of view of Loki. So now let's move on to the books that I actually finished so far in August, which are 5 books, and as always I'm going in star order, so in order of enjoyment. Although most of the books I kind of gave the same amount of stars, I kind of enjoyed them the same, but yeah, it's been an average reading month so far. First, I finally finished A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan, which is book 7 in the Wheel of Time series, and I decided that I'm going to scrap my Wheel of Time goal of finishing by the end of the year, because I found it just stresses me too much, and I ended up focusing more on wanting to finish the Wheel of Time series than on my studies and on finishing my studies, which, like, grade A for procrastination, but it's just not useful for me, and it's not useful for my life currently and where I put my focus. So I decided to take it slow again, and I'm just gonna maybe read 1 per month again, maybe less, but yeah, that's what I decided. And I like this book a little bit less than the ones before, I think. But I think book 7, book 8 is kind of where the slog in the Wheel of Time starts, so that doesn't really surprise me that much. Then next I finished the Grisha trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. I read Ruin and Rising, which is book 3, and surprisingly I enjoyed it more than either book 1 and book 2. Mel suddenly wasn't an asshole anymore, which kind of weird development. Where did that come from? Kind of unrealistic. I actually kind of saw why people find the Darkling more interesting. I warmed up to him a little bit more as a villain in this last book. I also kind of see more why Alina and the Darkling are such a big, like, ship, because there are certainly really interesting dynamics between them. And yeah, I might do a whole series review, but for now my thoughts are that basically if you enjoy old school YA, you will definitely love this series. If you don't, then you might still enjoy it, but it's probably not worth picking it up because there's so many way better YA books out there, in my opinion. Then the third book I want to talk about is Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. I gave this 3.5 stars. By the way, I also gave Ruin and Rising 3.5 stars, and I gave 3 stars to A Crown of Swords. But anyway, Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Byron. This is a Black Sapphic Cinderella retelling, and let me just say that I absolutely love this cover. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first person to talk about how gorgeous this cover is, but it just needs to be said again. Anyway, this story is set 300 years after Cinderella's death. And in honor of Cinderella, every year there's a huge ball in which all the eligible girls have to go and hope to be chosen as a wife to one of the eligible bachelors in the kingdom. However, there's a twist. If they are not chosen after 3 balls, they are forfeit. And basically, that's not a good thing. However, we follow Sophia, who really doesn't want to be chosen, and she also really doesn't want her childhood friend to be chosen, whom she is in love with. And so Sophia runs away, and that's basically the gist of the story. Now, I have to say a little caveat. 3.5 stars for some people might not sound good, but for me, for a YA, actually, that's really good. That's like high average, because I don't feel YA that much anymore. And even if I'm in a mood like this month so far to read a lot of YA, it's like really, really rare for me to give a YA 5 stars. So 4 stars is a YA that I absolutely loved, and 3.5 stars is a YA that I thoroughly enjoyed, which I did with this book. I really enjoyed our main character, even though she did really annoy me at the very beginning of the story. However, I did enjoy her character development. I also enjoyed the general story, and there's some positives and some negatives concerning a kind of trope or a writing style that is one of the big pet peeves of mine. And that is, I love fairy tales. I love the original fairy tales. And so I get really annoyed that all the time when you have retellings, you basically don't look at the original fairy tales, but you look at the Disney versions. So I did have a kind of moment when Cinderella's iconic blue dress was mentioned, because the iconic blue dress does not exist. However, I was pleasantly surprised by the end of the story when there were multiple references to the original fairy tales, like the cut off toes and heels, and also like the tree on the mother's grave, or Cinderella mother's grave. So yeah, I would recommend it actually, especially if you enjoy YA. Then the fourth book I want to talk about is Queen of Coin and Whispers by Helen Corcoran, which I also gave 3.5 stars. However, it's kind of a different 3.5 stars, because while Cinderella is Dead was a 3.5 stars simply because of enjoyment and the overall story, this enjoyment-wise would have definitely been a 4 stars. However, there were a few things that actively bothered me, so I had to dock it down that half star. Queen of Coin and Whispers follows the young Queen Leah, who ascends to the throne after her uncle's death, and it also follows Xenia, who Leah hires as her spy master. So not a spy, but the person who has all the strings in her hands. Minus point already is this is a double first person POV, which I have talked about a lot already. I don't like. I don't actively mind it most of the time, but I'm really not a fan. And it was also one of those cases here again where, in my opinion, the author did not make the two voices distinct enough. Overall, I still really enjoyed the book though. I really, really liked Leah's and Xenia's romance during the story, which I forgot to say, this is sapphic as well. I liked that it wasn't a YA that was over the course of a few days or even a few weeks, so it was a longer amount of time, and so you could have a more realistic development in the romance between Leah and Xenia. However, there was also something that was negative in the story, because this being a YA, it didn't really have the space for that much time. And so we got quite a few time jumps where we didn't really get the development. And we also didn't really get the development of the politics. It just jumped a few months into the future, and suddenly we had completely different things we had to deal with. And I would have loved to see a lot more of the development. However, I cannot really fault the author for that. I think it's just a problem of the genre in and of itself, of YA, which is one of the reasons why I do prefer adult, because authors do have a bigger word count to kind of flesh out the story. And also something that I both appreciated and kind of was sad about is that Helen Corcoran really tried to put a focus on the spy work as well as the romance. And because of that, both things kind of fell a bit short. And both things weren't as fleshed out as I would have liked them to be. But still, overall, enjoyment-wise, this would have been a 4 stars, because it went way more into the spy work and into the politics of court than YA usually does. And so even counting the things that I just talked about, I would still have given it 4 stars, because again, those aren't really things that are the fault of the author, it's the fault of the genre. And I need to be aware of what the genre is. However, the things that didn't make me dock a half star is things like that I didn't feel the time jumps were very well executed, where in one scene a character would say something or think something, and in the next scene something would happen that's contrary to those thoughts, which again, understandable because there's time in between and their opinion can change, but then don't put them directly in the scenes one after another. And also the other thing that kind of made me dock a half star is that there was talk about consent. Senia especially has thoughts where it's like, okay, can I even refuse the queen when she notices Leah's attraction to her? And then it's like never followed through that thought of consent, and how do you act like in such a situation where one of the characters has so much more power than the other character. And of course you know that they are both in love with each other because you're in both of their heads. But I still would have loved, if you put that thought in there already, to just have a little bit more follow through with that. And the last book I want to talk about today is Unravel the Dusk by Elizabeth Lim, which is the second and final book in the Blood of the Stars duology. And the first book was a Mulan retelling in which we follow Maya, whose father is a tailor, and she's also really, really skilled at tailoring. Now her father is called to court for a competition to becoming the next royal tailor. However, her father's hands kind of aren't up to the task anymore, so Maya disguises as her brother and takes her father's place. Now I was kind of nervous about the sequel because the first book does stand on its own pretty well, and I was scared that book 2 kind of just would feel tacked on and not really necessary. However, I absolutely still loved it. I gave this 4 stars. I didn't love it quite as much as book 1, which I gave 5 stars. However, I think it's still really worth picking up both books and picking up the duology, and I can highly recommend them. Maya as a character is just really, really likable and also relatable in a way. I also really like the Lord Enchanter. I really like Eden. I would have loved if we had gotten more of him in this book, but there's of course reasons why that can't be if you have read book 1 already. And yeah, I just really thoroughly enjoyed both of the books. They're just like a solid read. They're probably not gonna be like my next favorite read of all time. I don't think they're gonna be books that I'm thinking about all the time, because it just doesn't, again, happen that much to me with YA. But also I'm sorry for the noise outside again. There's still like building happening. But yeah, it's just a solid read and I really enjoy it, and it's just a solid recommendation for anyone who loves YA. And also I saw the German translation of this at my bookstore yesterday, so I'm thinking of giving it to my younger sister, although she might still be a bit too young for it because she's only 10. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And that was it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please think about giving me a thumbs up and also subscribing. All the links to my social media are in the description box down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you soon. Bye!